again, in our Today in Good News segment, here is an article at the Wall Street Journal with some optimism about the fatality rate. Again, ladies and gentlemen, science matters. When we're talking about infectious pathogens, we have to be concerned, based on the data, with the infectious, the contagious level of this, the R naught, the R0, and the fatality rate. How contagious is it and how deadly is it? Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to be an advanced level epidemiologist to ask basic questions like, can I catch this and will I die from it? Now, some scientists have been going over the data, which I'm relaying to you. I'm not going to add any spin to it. I'm going to read from it in this Wall Street Journal article, which is a small note of optimism here, that we may be drastically overestimating the fatality or lethalness of this virus. Wall Street Journal today, is the coronavirus as deadly as they say? Current estimates about the COVID-19 fatality rate may be too high by orders of magnitude. Aran Berndavid and Jay Bhattacharya. This piece is incredible. What it says, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go with takeaway number one from this screenshot one from the piece, is the number of infected people who die matter, not the amount of people who die from the identified positive cases. Let me explain that. I'm not talking about they don't matter. I'm talking about the number. Quote, fear of COVID-19 is based on its high estimated fatality rate. 2 to 4% of people with confirmed COVID-19 have died, according to the World Health Organization and others. So if 100 million Americans ultimately get the disease, 2 to 4 million could die. We believe that estimate, this is from the piece, is deeply flawed. The true fatality rate is the portion of those infected who die, as I said in the beginning, not the deaths from identified positive cases. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if the only people showing up to get tested for the Wuhan virus are people showing really awful symptoms who know they're sick, I can't breathe, it's a serious virus, that's beyond dispute. Beyond dispute. Mm-hmm. But if the only people showing up to get tested are the ones showing dramatic symptoms, I can't breathe, again, my head hurts, massive body aches, then ladies and gentlemen, by default, your statistics are going to be skewed because the less serious cases that either don't know they have it or thought they had some cold or a mild flu never show up to get tested, therefore don't show up in the fatality rate. The fraction matters.
Yeah.
That's like saying every baseball player in the world makes millions of dollars. Well, how do you know that? Well, because I went around the major leagues and polled them and the minimum salary is $1 million. You're not polling every baseball player in the world. You're only polling the greatest baseball players in the world. That's why you're getting that number. Now do that in reverse. If you're only polling, or I should say, taking into account in the statistics the most serious cases and leaving the mild ones out, of course you're going to get an inflated fatality rate. The piece points to 3 examples. Number 1, China. This is fascinating. I'll read it for you. You need to hear this. We're not doing hysteria here. We're going to focus on the science and the data. Quote, population samples from China, Italy, and Iceland and the U.S. provide relevant evidence. Around January 31st, countries sent planes to evacuate citizens from Wuhan, China. Listen to this. When those planes landed, the passengers were tested for COVID-19 and quarantined. After 14 days, the percentage who tested positive was 0.9%. If this was the prevalence in the greater Wuhan area on January 31st, then, with a population of about 20 million, then greater Wuhan had 178,000 infections, folks. About 30-fold more than the number of reported cases. If that's the case, ladies and gentlemen, the fatality rate then, by simple numbers, would be at least tenfold lower than the estimates based on reported cases. Kind of important, no? It's the number of infected people that matter, not the number of people who reported an infection because they were sick enough to do so. And again, I mean matter in relevance to the statistics on the fatality, not moral judgments on matter. No, don't be silly like liberals do. We need to know how contagious it is and how deadly it is if you are going to shut down the world. Kind of important. The number of infected matters. The China data seems to indicate that far more people were infected with this virus than the public numbers, which would obviously alter the fatality rate, thankfully, dramatically. You say, well, that's not enough. Well, let's check out Italy. Quote, Wall Street Journal, next, the northeastern Italian town of Vo, forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, I am Italian, but I have never been to Italy, shockingly, near the provincial capital of Padua. If I'm blowing that, I'm deeply sorry. On March 6th, all 3,300 people of this town in Italy were tested, and 90 were positive, a prevalence of 2.7%. All of them were tested. Applying that prevalence to the whole province, which had 198 reported cases, suggests that there were actually 26,000 infections at that time. That's more than 130-fold the number of actual reported cases. Since Italy's case fatality rate of 8% is estimated using the confirmed cases, the real fatality rate, ladies and gentlemen, could in fact be closer to 0.06. The data, ladies and gentlemen, matters. There's good news, bad news to this. The bad news first. It may be more contagious than we think. Again, what is that R0? How many people is that an infected person going to infect as well, given a native population with no immunity? Appears it's highly contagious. The good news, it doesn't appear nearly as fatal if these numbers hold as some of the initial numbers stated. You say, well, Dan, China and Italy is not enough. MSNBC and everyone, they're telling us we need to be hysterical all the time. We need to shut down the whole world. Because don't worry, there is no psychological trauma from another Great Depression. AP told us. Well, let's check out the Iceland data too, because data I thought mattered. You know, the left, the party of science. Yeah, that's sure. In Iceland, Decode Genetics is working with the government to perform widespread testing. In a sample of nearly 2,000 entirely asymptomatic people, for AP and the liberals, that means people showing no symptoms of this. Researchers estimated disease prevalence of just over 1%. Iceland's first case was reported on February 28th, weeks behind the United States. It's plausible that the proportion of the U.S. population that has been infected is double, triple, listen to this, or even 10 times as high as the estimates from Iceland. This also implies a dramatically lower fatality rate. Folks, I'm not here to put lipstick on anything. This is a deadly serious problem. People have died. People will tragically continue to die. But the world we live in is full of risk every single day. Risks we take into account in our own lives. As I said to you weeks ago, the flu is deadly, very deadly. And if you're older, it can be extremely deadly. So why doesn't everybody get a flu shot? Matter of fact, why does half of the United States, roughly half the population, not get a flu shot? Because you're all grown men and grown women, if you're listening to my show, most likely. You're grown men and women who make your own decisions. You gauge your own risk, and you take it into account in living your daily life. It's a serious virus. We live in a world of risk. And making decisions based on data that may not be accurate and scaring people to death 24 hours a day, I'm not doing that. You can tune into CNN and MSNBC for that. I'm not doing it.
You just heard The Dan Bongino Show. You can also get Dan's podcasts on iTunes or SoundCloud. And follow Dan on Twitter 24/7 @DBongino.